Every society, every community must answer, whether explicitly or implicitly, the question of who has the power? Does the power reside with the people, or does it reside with some sort of absolute authority state? If power resides with the people, then the people must maintain a right to rebellion. Any right to rebellion requires the means to do so, and that means requires weapons. Now, if that statement makes you uncomfortable, then congratulations, you're likely a Westerner from the 20th or 21st century. If this makes sense to you, then you are either not privileged to be living in the West and born during this period of time, or maybe you have a solid command and grasp of history. Let's look at the other side of the coin. If all power resides with the state, such as divine right rule from the Middle Ages, that makes any rebellion against the state a moral wrong at the outset, regardless of the purpose or justifications used. After all, if you're rebelling against the state, and the state is sanctioned by God or some supreme deity or authority, then you are likewise rebelling against them. If that is the case, then crushing any means to that rebellion by disarming the people makes complete sense and is actually a moral good. If this sounds right to you, then whether conscious or otherwise, you have elected that your government and the people influencing that government all must be perfect to make any terrible outcome, such as a tyranny, a complete impossibility, 0% chance. It does not matter if that tyranny would take a right-wing or a left-wing form, however you conceptualize those terms. Philosophically, we could compare these two schools or systems of thought to those coming from John Locke versus Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes, who lived during the late 1500s to late 1600s in England, authored the book The Leviathan and believed that the state of nature, in essence, was the same as the state of war. And not just any war, but the war of all against all. The only way out of that was through a strong absolutist government. Not only was that the way out, that was the only alternative that could really work without risking the war of all against all. Otherwise, you get a life that is nasty, brutish, and short, a phrase you probably know, heard before, and now you know where that came from. To avoid this, all power, according to Hobbes, must be concentrated in the state, and by his view, suitable to the time that he was writing in, specifically a monarchy. Any power residing outside that state risks a war of all against all. By extending this view, disarming people is not only natural, it's probably also a moral obligation to ensure that the state can maintain absolute control and authority. I think it's also worthwhile to just kind of pause to give us an idea about the insight and perspective of an individual who would think this way. To note that Hobbes contributed to the intellectual life of England not only through his writings, but also through the translating of the works of Thucydides, a Greek writer and thinker. Now, the informed viewers will understand what I mean by this and why that's important. You see, when someone chooses to translate a foreign writer, a foreign thinker into their own native language, what they're basically saying with this action is, we need this guy. We need this guy's ideas. So Hobbes did this for Thucydides. Who is Thucydides? Thucydides was the Greek forerunner by about 1500 years to an Italian that you may have heard of by the name of Niccolo Machiavelli. Thucydides is all about realpolitik, that big fish eat little fish. Thucydides famously wrote what is known to history as the Melian Dialogue, where the powerful Athenians explained to the Melians that, quote, the strong take what they will, and the weak suffer what they must, end quote. Morality has nothing to do with it. Machiavelli would then go on to build on this by instructing his reader in his book, The Prince, to try to appear to be moral because of the advantages that can afford you. But Thucydides did not really have time for that, and besides, he subscribed to a different and kind of an ancient view of morality, something that would would definitely be brought back into flavor and style by a German by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche. But I'm wandering. My point in bringing this all up is to illustrate kind of the road and the school of thought and the perspectives of this is kind of how this quilt, this is how this fabric and this worldly outlook all hangs together. This is the view of disarmament. Please pardon the brief interruption. To hit that like button helps us out, helps out the channel. And if you just found us while browsing through, welcome. We hope that you enjoy this content and enjoy a lot more that we have coming up. Hit that like button. Don't forget to hit that bell to make sure you're notified of any new videos. My question for you in the discussions in the comments below are this. Do you think there will come a time when the Second Amendment is no longer viewed as a right-wing, left-wing thing? Do you think there will come a time when it turns into a we the people thing? Or is this a pipe dream? Will it no longer be a political football at some point? Let me know in the comment section, and back to the video. By contrast, we have John Locke, one of the leading thinkers of English thought that directly influenced the American Constitution and former government in the late 18th century. Locke believed in natural law and the right to rebellion. In fact, I think it was Thomas Jefferson who included Locke in his list of the 3 most important thinkers, along with Francis Bacon and Isaac Newton. Locke is so inextricably woven into American thought, culture, and process that it can be sometimes difficult to see where he ends and where the framers of the Declaration of Independence and later the Constitution begin. So Locke, in a sense, renews the right to rebellion in a modern sense. He by no means invents the idea of rebellion inside the Western tradition. The Magna Carta of 1215 famously limited the power of the King of England to accept that others had rights and could overrule the king and even depose of him through force if required. Thomas Aquinas, a hugely important Christian medieval thinker writing in France, considered a law to be an act of violence if it contradicted a human or divine good or improperly overextended the power of the one making the law. In Aquinas' view, resisting such a tyrant who acts outside of the law of divine and human good, resisting that is not bad, since it is the tyrant themselves who committed the sedition through their overstep, thereby giving the people the right to resist and rebel. I could go on and on and on with other examples inside the Western tradition alone, such as the Golden Bull of 1222 by King Andrew II of Hungary, among others, but that would just serve to really underscore the same point, that the right to rebellion is by no means rare or unique to the Western tradition itself or the English tradition and therefore the American tradition. Locke said that under natural law, everyone has a right to life, liberty, and private property. Now, under this view of social contract theory, whereby we basically all exist as a community by trading away certain actions and privileges to that community, including to the government, such as the power to tax us, so that we can gain back the security from that government, including the courts and so forth, the protection of our natural rights. There's a give and there's a take. If that government breaks this fundamental rule of society, then the government has forfeited their power and the people may withdraw their consent to be governed by that corrupt government. Locke wrote in his text, the 2 treatises of government, quote, "Whensoever, therefore, the legislative shall transgress this fundamental rule of society, and either by ambition, fear, folly, or corruption, endeavor to grasp themselves or put into the hands of any other an absolute power over the lives, liberties, and estates of the people, by this breach of trust, they forfeit the power the people had put into their hands for quite contrary ends, and it devolves to the people who have a right to resume their original liberty," end quote. In a nutshell, if the government breaks the natural laws here, if they transgress the limits of the power appointed to them through the consent of the people may withdraw that consent. If this sounds extreme, then maybe what I am about to read next might sound even more extreme. It is a document written on July 4th, 1776. It's called the Declaration of Independence. Quote, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation to such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness." End quote. These are the words that all Americans celebrate every 4th of July. These are not extreme words or ideals. Rejection of these ideals, rejection of the right to rebellion and the means to do so, is itself the sedition and extreme of being an absolute statist. What is extreme is gun control. What is extreme is civilian disarmament. What is extreme is believing that the state is so perfect that there's never a possibility of having a need to check its power. That is what is dangerous. That is what is extreme. Most of the talk about the Second Amendment and surrounding the American Second Amendment surrounds crime and misuse statistics, about innocent lives taken as well as saved. That's important and it's part of the conversation, but it really overlooks the first key fundamental purpose of the Second Amendment. And that's something that we have lost through the privilege of our recent history. The preservation of the right to rebellion. The vaccine against tyranny, taken together with the right to free speech. These are the two fundamental pillars upon which our mighty republic rests or may fall. These principles belong neither to the right or the left. This is not about what zip code you live in, what color you are, or what God you worship, or anything else. They are about keeping us free. These principles of speech and arms belong to you and to I. They belong to the people, so long as we are brave and honorable enough to keep them. Thanks for sticking with us. Don't forget to hit that like button. Our quote of the day comes from, what do you know? John Locke. Quote, "Parents wonder why the streams are bitter when they themselves have poisoned the fountain." End quote. I appreciate you sticking with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.